Happy Valentine's
Yay! Happy
Day!
Valentine's Day.
Amy's wearing a cute pink sweater,
Oh
and
yeah.
I am not going to run into the other room and put bright red lipstick on because I'm in a sweater.
It's
So
tempting.
pretend. Pretend, everyone. Just
Yeah.
pretend. If you're watching, pretend.
Yep.
Well, hello. I'm Olivia,
Hello. I'm Amy, and
and
this
this
is
is Girl
Girls
Scout
Gone
Spooky.
Spooky.
Ooh.
Yeah,
And this is our Valentine's Day episode, and because it's a
you know what that
holiday,
means.
you know what that means. Scary stories, motherfuckers.
Scary story.
Um, and probably fake ones, you know? Usually we're trying
Yeah.
to hit you hard with the facts. The
Yes.
ghosty paranormal facts, dude.
Exactly.
But today we're coming at you with some fiction.
Yeah.
Or is it?
Mine is,
I don't
well,
know.
I'm pretty sure mine is fiction
Yeah, okay.
as
Yours,
well.
yes. Yours, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Uh-huh.
And let's see our order.
I think it might be
Am
you.
I up first this week? Okay. Okay. It's me. Mine is
Okay.
very scary.
Oh God, let's hear it.
Um, it's a little long, and by a little long I
Okay.
mean it's very long, but it's just the one. And
Okay.
I'm gonna try to mm, consolidate some stuff as we go.
Okay.
So this story is from No Sleep 7 years ago. It's an
Oh
oldie but a
wow.
goodie
Uh-huh.
from Mr. underscore stuff. Love that.
Uh-huh.
And it is called Charles Bonnet syndrome. I think it's Bonnet. It might be Binet, but we're going to
Mm-hmm.
go with Bonnet.
Okay.
So he begins. I
Okay.
suffer with a condition called Charles Bonnet syndrome, or visual release hallucinations, if you want to get more technical. It's a condition that's actually far more common than you might realize. It's estimated that as many as half of people with gradual loss of vision will experience one or more bouts over their lifetime. Yet, I'm willing to bet most of you have never heard of it. The reason for that is most sufferers are probably too scared to tell anybody what they've experienced, and I know I was. Getting ahead of myself. My name is Andrew, and I'm 26. So 2 years ago, I woke up with awful blurred vision, every single edge and detail clouded as if someone had smeared Vaseline on a camera lens, and it wasn't getting better. I was scared then and got over to Dr. Harper's surgery as fast as I could, suddenly needing to take a cab rather than climb in the car I'd driven without incident ever since I'd bought it 3 years prior. The doctor did some tests, asked me some questions, things like, have you been thirsty lately? How often do you urinate? How would you describe your levels of fatigue? And then he gave me the diagnosis that changed my life forever: diabetes type 1. He explained everything about insulin shots with every meals, what things I could and couldn't eat, and then he got to my eyes. Andrew, your diabetes has resulted in maculopathy. Do you know what that is? I shook my head dumbly, already reeling with the shock of my diagnosis, and Dr. Harper went on. It's when diabetes affects the blood vessels at the back of your eye, blocking them and causing them to leak into the macula, the central part of your retina that helps you perceive color and fine detail. When these blood vessels leak into the macula, it can cause significant damage. With a lump in my throat, I asked, okay, so how do we make this better? I couldn't quite see his face properly for obvious reasons, but his tone of voice was enough to tell me what I'd been dreading. I'm sorry, Andrew, he replied. Perhaps if we'd caught this a little sooner, we might have had some treatment options available to us, but I'm afraid the damage has been pretty extensive. We can take steps to arrest the development of the condition, but I'm afraid it's irreversible. I felt as if my world had come crashing down around me. I was just 24, still at my physical peak. I was active, playing basketball and cycling a few times a week, and now my health, my body, my sight had been taken from me. First 6 months were tough. He goes on to say he breaks up with his girlfriend. He was so angry. He lost his job because he was an architect, so he needed his sight. Fell out with a lot of his friends, was just angry, jealous of his friends whose lives hadn't been so horribly changed by what he was going through. He had a nurse who came to see him, a woman named Lois, who was just very no nonsense. And she said, "You're an asshole." And he said, "What?" She said, "So you've got diabetes. Do you know how many people do?" She asked. She continued, "Do you think they all hide in their apartments, refusing to get on with their lives? Losing your vision is a terrible thing, and you do have my sympathy. But Andrew, it's no excuse to give up. But you don't, I argued, understand, she growled. One of the bravest men I know was paralyzed from the neck down when he was just a child, and he never gave up. You can do so much more with your life, and you have people that want to help you do that, but you can't even be bothered to shave that ugly fucking beard off. Stop being a crybaby and make a fucking difference. So she leaves, but it really sinks in what she said. He's like, holy shit. Like, she's right. I'm wasting my life. He's looking around his apartment and things are blurry, but he can see what a mess he's let his apartment kind of devolve into. So Lois comes back, sees he's clean shaven, the apartment is cleaned up, and doesn't say anything about it, but just is very clearly like, I approve of these changes. So he talks about this being like the first day of the rest of his life. You know, he's like, okay, so he moves into a new apartment on the ground floor, something that's more accessible to him. Joined a group of other young people with visual impairments, made friends there, got back in touch with some of his old friends. The Sawyers, who are a couple that ran the local grocery store, would bring his groceries. So just like got his life together. So
Yeah.
he said things were going so well. And then 1 year ago, it started. I walked into my living room, a mug of coffee in my hand, and I saw a Victorian funeral carriage stood right there on my rug, complete with two huge, proud horses in full livery adorned with long black plumes in their bridles. They stood perfectly still while the driver, a small bearded man in period costume and a top hat, fidgeted with the reins and peered at me expectantly. Bizarrely, they were far clearer than the usual blurry shapes that I could see. I nearly pissed my pants. I dropped my cup, spilling scalding hot coffee over my feet, jumped backwards with a cry of pain and alarm, and when I returned my attention to the horses in the carriage back in the room, they were gone. In that moment, I thought, I'm going mad. I'm losing my actual mind. This was not a daydream, but I somehow convinced myself that's what it was. Fast forward to 2 weeks later, when I was finally starting to forget about this weird incident, I saw a giant, floating, swirling orange ball in my bathroom. I stood staring at it, this bizarre, rotating, levitating globe that was a little larger than a beach ball hanging in midair over my tub. Open mouthed for full 10 seconds before finally screwing my eyelids tightly closed and whispering to myself, that isn't there, that isn't there. After 5 seconds, I opened my eyes again, and it wasn't there. So he's just like, what the hell's going on? I'm like finally getting my life together. And he says this time period was even harder than when he first found out about his diagnosis, because he was like, okay, that was a definitive prognosis. There are facts, and it's a medical professional telling you what's happening. It's something physical. It has a name, and there's a treatment plan. But this was like, he was starts thinking like, my own mind is turning against me. What's going on? So Lois, the nurse, picks up on the problem. She's noticing that he's being skittish. So she asks, what's wrong? Do you need to talk about anything? But I told her no, I was fine. I hadn't been sleeping well, which of course that last part was true. Um, he, I'm just like skimming this part because there's a lot of
Yeah.
detail in here. She lets it go. A full month passes before the next incident. And I really did think that maybe I'd put this whole mess behind me. Every day passing, my confidence had grown, so that Wednesday morning, I'd stepped out onto the sunny street feeling pretty carefree. Each Wednesday, I'd treat myself to a latte down at Joe's, the same coffee shop that I visited with Lois often. It was a custom that gave me a great deal of pleasure, one that had seen me forge friendships with other regulars as well as the staff, including Joe himself. As I made my way down the street, white stick in hand, I glanced about me, taking in the colors and shapes of the world around me. I enjoyed the feel of the sun in my face and on my face and the sounds of the birds singing. It was a good day. And then I saw them. A party of pilgrims, 6 of them, all dressed in settler era attire. I know, the visions are so
Yeah.
bizarre.
Hmm.
All dressed in settler era attire, sitting cross-legged on the asphalt. They didn't look at me. Instead, they were engaged in a heated yet strangely silent conversation. I froze staring at them. Still, they argued, gesticulating furiously at one another. However, I couldn't hear their angry voices, despite the fact that, judging by their anger, they must be screaming at one another. Paralyzed by shock, the white stick fell from my numb fingers, clattering onto the sidewalk. I turned to leave, desperate to flee from the haunting sight of these colonists in the road, but I was so panicked in such a hurry that I stepped on my cane. It rolled underfoot, and before I knew it, I pitched over, tumbling to the hard ground below. I didn't break my fall in time, banged my cheek pretty hard on the ground, and skinned my palms. I heard a cry out from a passerby, a friendly, concerned woman who rushed to my side. She helped me up, applied a Kleenex to my throbbing cheek. I told her I was okay, there's nothing to worry about, but she insisted on driving me to my doctor's office to have my injuries looked at. Um, so fast forward to the doctor's office. Andrew, why don't you tell me what happened? Dr. Harper asked, gently dabbing at my cheek with disinfectant. I explained that I just lost my balance, no harm was done, but I think he saw through my feeble protestations to my underlying agitation. He didn't press, he didn't force the matter. He simply asked what might have caused my clumsiness. And then he asked how I'd been as of late. When I finished mumbling my way through the most noncommittal answer I could muster, he placed a gentle, reassuring hand on my shoulder. Andrew, why don't you tell me what happened? I burst into tears. I told him how scared I was, how I'd fought so hard for my independence, and now I knew it would be taken from me. He listened patiently, then asked me to tell him why I ever thought that. I paused, took a deep breath, and thought about it. This was the point of no return. But really, what other option did I have? So, tears running down my cheeks, I told Dr. Harper everything. I told him about the horse in the carriage, the orange globe, the pilgrims. I told him how I'd been living every day in fear, how I was terrified I was losing my mind. And then he said, Andrew, I don't think you're losing your mind. You say that even though you've seen these things, you never heard any noise from them. Have you detected any odors or experienced any other physical sensations like touching them? I shook my head no, and he patted my shoulder once again. Andrew, have you heard of Charles Bonnet syndrome? He asked. Charles who? I asked. Okay, let me explain, he said kindly. Charles Bonnet was a Swiss naturalist who was born in the 1700s. He discovered a curious condition in his elderly grandfather, who was nearly completely blind due to cataracts. The old man regularly experienced visual hallucinations, including random patterns and even people and places. Sound familiar? Yes, I replied, still confused. So I'm suffering from dementia? No, not at all. Do you know how perception works? In layman's terms, your eyes take in light via the iris and pupil, which is then processed via the retina and translated into electrical signals, which are decoded by the brain, which simply organizes these signals into a recognizable image. With me so far? I nodded. When the retina becomes damaged, such as those that have undergone macular degeneration, those signals become warped and jumbled, the doctor went on. The brain still receives them, so it does its job, translating these distorted signals into an image. It kind of fills in the gaps for you. And sometimes it fills these gaps with colors, patterns, creatures, places that aren't actually present. And this is called Charles Bonnet syndrome. I nearly wept with relief. So I'm not mad. Not at all, the doctor replied. This is an entirely physical condition. Your mind is in full working order. If you were suffering any form of mental illness, your delusions wouldn't be limited to just one sense. You'd hear them, smell them, even feel them. This is a condition solely related to your eyes, not your brain. As I left Dr. Harper's office, I felt as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Sure, my vision was still an issue, but now I knew it was only a problem with my eyes, not my mind. I knew I could handle that situation. I was ready to face the world. Since then, I've seen plenty of weird visions. A huge waterfall in the park, complete with hazy mist and butterflies flitting about. An intricate and quite impossible structure of scaffolding crisscrossing the entire front of my apartment block. Hell, on the 4th of July last year, I even saw a great swooping green dragon in the sky, twisting and cavorting through the air overhead. All look completely, utterly real, yet I now know they were tricks of the eye, therefore no longer really disturbing to me. In fact, I actually came to quite enjoy them, even looking at them as unique and entertaining little works of art that existed purely for my pleasure and nobody else's. I came to welcome them. Then, a month ago, I saw her.
Oh
Are you
God.
ready?
No, I'm not.
It was nighttime. It's always nighttime when I see her. And I was just getting ready for bed. I walked into the kitchen to get myself a glass of water and actually cried out in alarm when I spotted the figure in the corner. She was tall, by far the tallest woman I'd ever seen, and even though she stood hunched, she still had at least 6 inches on me. I was used to seeing, characters in quotes in dated and bizarre dress, but this felt different somehow. It didn't seem like an outfit from one time, instead this weird mishmash of items. She wore a tuxedo jacket, figure hugging in black, tailored to the female shape, over a dirty old ruffled dress shirt. To complete the ensemble, she wore a bright red bow tie. On her hands, which she held out to either side as if shrugging or maybe feeling for rain, she wore dirty white gloves. Her fingers were disproportionately long, almost spidery, and occasionally they twitched as if longing to grip something. On her lower half, she wore shorts, the same crimson as her bow tie, over opaque black nylons. Her legs were long, lithe, attractive, if truth be told, the legs of a dancer. She also wore red heels, the same hue as her shorts and bow tie, but they sparkled and shimmered. Why can I not speak? Bringing to mind Julie Garland's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. As strange as the ensemble was, I couldn't tear my eyes from her face. Most of it was obscured by a jaunty bowler hat tipped and tilted to hide her eyes and nose, but beneath the brim of her hat, I could see the deathly pale skin of her face and a grin that sent shivers down my spine. It was wide, too wide, with entirely too many teeth. A smile is meant to be an expression of warmth. It's meant to feel welcoming and benevolent, but the look on this woman's face oozed malice. It felt much like the sort of glee I'd expect from a snake as it corners a rat. However, the thing that startled me most was that she had a third arm sprouting from her back, curled up and over her head like a scorpion's tail. It was longer than any arm should be, and the hand only had three fingers like a claw. It was pointed straight at me, and as I swore in dismay and stumbled sideways, it seemed to track my movement. I stood staring at this creepy figure for a few seconds, trying to get my head around the situation. She just stood there in the corner, grinning back. Finally, I realized this is just another of my hallucinations, and I breathed an audible sigh of relief. One of the tricks I've picked up over the months of suffering with Charles Bonnet syndrome is to break the line of vision toward whichever stimulus is causing my brain to interpret the images into the hallucination. Think of it like restarting a faulty computer. To this end, I close my eyes and count to five, and when I open them, the hallucination is gone. So as I stared at this horrifying, malformed figure in my kitchen, I knew that to make the image go away, I simply had to close my eyes. I'll be honest here. When I counted to five, I hesitated a little before opening my eyes. If I'd opened my eyes and she'd still been standing there, smiling that wicked smile, I think I might have had a heart attack. But she wasn't. And I breathed another long sigh of relief, fetched my glass of water, and went back to bed. The tall woman haunted my thoughts in the days after I saw her. She was different from the other visions I'd had. Somehow she felt more real. And my buddy Jason picked up on this agitation when we met for lunch the following Friday. So he tells him what's going on. So he's like explaining her. The guy's like, "You're so distracted. What's going on?" And he's like, "It's nothing. I just had this hallucination that's really bothering me." And he's like, "I thought those were kind of okay now." And he was like, "Yeah, but this is different. She scared me." And he's like, "She." So he describes the woman, how she appeared to him. I explained that unlike any of my other hallucinations, she felt more real. She was the first to feature such a weird and unsettling mutation. Sure, I'd seen smaller versions of people in the past, a phenomenon referred to as Lilliputian by medical professionals, but the extra appendage and impossibly distorted face were something I had yet to encounter thus far. I think it was that, combined with the unnerving expectant stance, that had disturbed me the most. "So, you say she had great legs?" "Shut up, you asshole," I laughed, throwing my napkin at him. "No, seriously, I get it, man," he replied. "If I walked into a room and a giant mutant was waiting for me, it'd scare the shit out of me too. But you know what caused you to see this. It's like the coachman and that waterfall. It's a condition you have and you know how to deal with it." I know, I know. Yeah, you're right. I did feel better too, so I smiled at him. Next time I saw the tall woman, just under a week later, I was brushing my teeth. I was stood at the basin,
Patient.
brushing away when I spotted a figure in the mirror. She was out in the dark hallway, peeking around the door behind me. That same
No.
sinister grin. I know. Why is that the peeking, dude?
I hate the peeking. Yeah.
The peeking is horrid. The same sinister grin I'd seen before stretched her narrow face into a distorted grimace. The dirty bowler hat pushed down over her eyes once again. Each of those three long, spidery hands gripped the door frame. As crazy as the sound, it felt like she was almost trying to avoid being spotted. But I cried out, spitting toothpaste foam all over the mirror, my toothbrush clattering into the basin. I spun around, my heart thumping in my chest, my breath ragged in my throat. She wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. The doorway was empty. I tiptoed forward hesitantly, trying to look around the doorframe into the hallway without actually sticking my neck out into its shadowy confines. The seconds ticked by as I drew closer and closer. I couldn't see anything, so finally, with a whisper of self affirmation, I stepped out of the bathroom The hallway was empty, as was the rest of my apartment. I was shaken again. This was the first time I had seen a hallucination in a reflection, and I wasn't even sure that I'd actually seen it. Now, as I sit here writing this, knowing what would follow, I think I thought like that to try to protect myself, to shield myself from the truth. I was an idiot. A full fortnight passed without incident. Sure, I saw a flash of color one day, a dancing yellow lightning bolt that zigzagged back and forth on the street outside my apartment, but that was exactly the sort of thing I'd come to expect. It was exciting, otherworldly, but it wasn't scary, not like she was. In retrospect, that fortnight was blissful. It was a reminder of what life could be like, the existence I'd carved out for myself since my diagnosis, and life was good. The night that changed the way I viewed the tall woman, last night. I'd been out and had a couple of drinks. I met the other guys with visual impairment for dinner, and we ended up at a bar afterwards. I wasn't hammered, but we got through plenty of beer between us, and by the time I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt decidedly lightheaded. It took me a while to make it home, laughing and talking to a couple of the other guys from our group as we strolled along. It had been a great evening, and it's probably the last truly good one I'll ever have. I bid the other guys good night and, fumbling with my key, let myself in. With swaying steps, I strolled into my hallway, slamming the door a little too loudly behind me. I took off my jacket and hung it on the hook by the door and then hit the light switch. She was waiting at the end of the hallway, all three hands held aloft into claws, reaching for me, that same maddening, malevolent grin on her pale face. I swore again, louder than ever, actually jumping back a step, recoiling from the impossibly tall and terrifying figure lying in wait in my own home. The tall woman didn't move. She just stood there, staring and smiling at me. I stared back, but I sure as hell didn't smile. Jesus Christ, I muttered under my breath. You know how you can feel a little paranoid after a few beers? That feeling of non-specific post-alcohol dread. Imagine that combined with a giant grinning mutant woman suddenly appearing in your home. Suffice it to say, it was very, very, very uncool. Ugh, I don't need this, I sighed and closed my eyes. One, two, three, four, five. When I opened my eyes, her face was a foot from my own, grinning wider than ever. She dashed the length of the hallway and was now stood so close that her long, grasping arms were on either side of me, her fingers twitching and clawing at the air around my face. I could see her chest heaving, as if she were actually laughing silently at my attempts to dismiss her, as if the thought that I could ever be free of her was amusing. I screamed, a full bodied shriek of terror, and actually dropped to my knees, covering my head as if to fend off an unexpected blow. But it never came. Finally, I lowered my hands, gasping for breath, shaking. The hallway was empty, the tall woman nowhere to be seen. I stayed there on my knees for a moment, gasping for breath, and then I was on my feet. I turned and ran out of the apartment, out of the building, into the street. I stood there shivering, terrified beyond reason, without a clue as to what I'd do next. So finally, I pulled out my phone from my pocket and made a phone call. Hey, Andy, what's up? Jason asked. Jason, I need you to come here, I said, sobbing. He didn't ask why. Instead, he simply replied, I'm on my way. Less than 20 minutes later, his car pulled up outside, and he dashed over to the steps outside my building where I was sitting shivering. He threw his jacket around my shoulders and asked what happened, his voice filled with concern. She's in there, I stammered. The tall woman, she's back. Okay, okay, he said, gently helping me to my feet. Come on, man, let's go in there together and we'll check it out. I wish I could say that I was brave when we went inside, but I'd be lying. I cowered behind Jason, one hand on his shoulder as we made our way through my home. Of course, we didn't find a thing. We're talking a giant mutant woman in a pokey little one-bed apartment. Where the hell was she going to hide? Finally, after we'd checked every single room twice, I had to admit that she was gone. I'm so sorry, man, I apologized, feeling so dumb. I got scared and I'm sorry, man. Hey, forget about it, buddy, Jason said. So I'm here now. Where do you keep your booze? Half a bottle of bourbon later, we were both feeling pretty talkative. She's just kind of different, I tried to explain. I get it, he said. It's like you saw something bad and you feel bad, and that's bad. He didn't get it. No, she's different, I explained. I've had a repeat hallucination before, and they've never been scary, or I've never had a repeat hallucination before. She's not like the others. Dude, Jason said, taking another sip of bourbon. You've got like Charlie Boney syndrome, and that makes you see shit. So he waved his hand in the air like a magician who just performed a trick. I know. No, listen, Andy. You know it makes you see shit. It's just your eyes, yeah? You didn't hear anything. You didn't feel anything. This is how that stuff goes. It's your eyes. And I know it's scary, man, but you've been through like hell and high water in your life so far. You're tough. One of the toughest, bravest guys I know. And you can handle some creepy hallucination, bitch. I laughed. I couldn't help it. She is a very creepy hallucination bitch, though, dude. He laughed too. We both took a drink. You know, that could help, he said finally, his voice thoughtful. What, drinking? I asked. No. Well, yes, it does, he giggled. I mean, like demystifying her. You should give her a name, something stupid, so she's not scary. I'm about to say that as much as I like creepy hallucination bitch, that's a bit of a mouthful. I laughed. Yeah, I get that, he replied. Suddenly he'd said something he'd said came back to me. How about Helen? I suggest Helen Highwater. Awesome, he said, then raised his glass. Here's to Helen, buddy. To Helen. I smiled and drained my glass. Jason spent the night on the sofa, mainly because he had too much to drink. Basically, he goes on to say he's so grateful for his friend that he came. It gave him a sense of security that even though this vision could appear, that he could call Jason, and now he had kind of the silly name for her that would make him feel a little better. They both wake up super hungover. They go to Joe's for coffee. Jason finally broke the silence as we're drinking our coffee. So, you feel cool now? He asked, his mouth still full of blueberry muffin. I nodded. Yeah, I think so. Not still freaked out about you know who? He asked. Helen, I replied with a smile. No, I really don't think I am. I reckon I can handle some creepy hallucination, bitch. Good, he laughed, giving me a hearty pat on the back. That's cool, man. I bet you can. Now, after a night spent cowering in my bathroom, too scared to go out into my apartment, I know we were both wrong about everything. Remember how I told you that the thought of being institutionalized, I skipped over this part, but the thought of being institutionalized, that the very idea of losing my grasp on reality was the most terrifying thing I could imagine? Now I'd welcome that because the alternative is far, far worse. After breakfast, I said goodbye to Jason and he climbed into his car and drove away. The day passed without incident. Lois stopped by this afternoon and she even commented on how upbeat I seemed. You got a lady in your life? She asked casually. I laughed at that, wondered what she'd think if she knew the truth. Yeah, something like that. Good for you, she sniffed. You make sure you treat her right. Sure, I'll do my best. Tonight, still a little wiped from the exertions of the previous evening, I decided to turn in early. I brushed my teeth, washed my hands and face, and got changed. Finally, I fetched a glass of water and walked into my bedroom. I climbed into bed and instantly felt so relaxed. Within mere seconds, I was ready for sleep. That sudden, overwhelming drowsiness that comes when you've spent a whole day keeping sleep at bay. I decided that resistance was futile and sat up to switch off the light. I nearly didn't see her, but as I reached for the switch, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. My heart leapt into my throat as I turned to the foot of the bed. The tall woman was crouching there, her grinning face staring at me from just beyond my feet. So many teeth. Her long, slender fingers spread out over my blankets, twitching slightly as she gripped the end of the bed. Slowly, excruciatingly so, her third arm came into view over her shoulder, joining her other hands on my bedding. I froze, utterly petrified. I was at a crossroads here, arriving at a pivotal moment that had been coming for some time. She watched me, grinning, as if she were waiting to see what I'd do, cruel amusement flickering across her pale face. But this time, I'd had enough. You don't scare me anymore, I said, my voice filled with defiance and anger. I'm not letting you do this to me. I reached across to the light switch. Good night, Helen, I said triumphantly, then flicked it, plunging the room into darkness. I laid there, a sense of tremendous pride surging through me, and I grinned to myself in my warm, comfortable bed, overjoyed at the emotional victory of overcoming my own fear. And then it happened. The thing that led me here. Something that turned my blood to ice water, my bowels to jelly. Good night, Andrew, her rasping voice hissed from the darkness. That's
No.
the end. That's the end, dude.
Oh no. So he heard her. Oh god.
She
Is it
real. Oh,
real?
she real.
Oh no.
Isn't that
Wow.
so scary?
That was so well written because I
You
could
know,
picture her perfectly.
I know. He
Terrifying.
I did cut out some of the detail, but it reads like a book.
Yeah.
He's British or from the
Mhm.
UK, just some of his word choice you can tell, but
Yeah.
he's really well written. It's like very yeah, it's
Oh
very
god. That is so
it like
scary.
my hands are shaking. It like actually
Yeah.
really scared me when I first
Uh-huh.
read it and rereading it, knowing what was coming. My heart was pounding.
Yeah,
So funny.
that because
So there you go.
it's like it could be real, almost like I was looking up Charles Bonnet syndrome.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Yeah. Which I'm
So,
sure is why he based the story off of it, because it's
yeah,
a real thing, but it's like a very scary concept that
yeah,
your
very.
brain can just make stuff up.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh my god, that's a good
So
one.
scary,
Does he
right?
have
I
any
know.
others on No Sleep? Did you
I
look?
didn't look. I'll definitely check because he
Yeah,
was great.
yeah, really well done. Ugh,
Gross.
good ones.
Is it apartment time?
Yeah, it is. It's apartment
Yay!
time,
I'm so
and
excited.
yeah, like I've enjoyed this story, but I was thinking today, like, I'm ready to wrap this one up.
Wrap her
So
up.
let's do that. No, there's
Yeah.
8 more parts. So
8?
yeah, it's like 15 parts or something. I kind of lost
Oh,
count of even where we are or how many are coming up.
oh my God.
So I have written down because it's like essential to have a summary of what we've already
Right.
read. And then I summarized 3 more parts, and then I'm going to read a
I'm
fourth.
so sorry that this is turning into a research project,
It's okay. I
but
like
it's
had
so good.
it is good. I just had no idea that we were going to be embarking on this
Mm-mm.
journey when I picked
No.
this one. And
No, me neither.
yeah, because I chose this, from No Sleep because it was like on the
Mhm.
top rated of all time.
Yeah.
And it won some award back in 2020, but it's getting like fewer and fewer readers as I go down the
Yeah.
parts. But it's
Yeah,
still
which
good.
makes sense.
But yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I'm invested. So
Same.
let's do it. But I
Okay, let's
guess
do it. I'm ready.
our next story episode will probably be another 4 parts summarized, and then we might be
Yeah.
done. So
Yeah, okay.
we'll see.
We also could tag team the last parts. Like I can
Yeah,
take a
that's
few
true.
and you can take a few and we can wrap it up.
Okay, yeah,
Because
I'll.
St. Patrick's Day is just around the corner.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, we're not far off. Okay, perfect.
We're not far off. We're
I
good.
was trying to think of when our next one would be, and I
Yeah,
was like,
St. Patty's, I
how am I
think,
going
will
to
be the next.
summarize like 8 parts in one episode?
Oh my god.
So, anyway, okay, so this is written by New to Town Jam, that's in
Jam.
caps. So, the summary of what we've read so far, it's a couple who moves into a new apartment. On their first day in there, they unpack, go to bed, and the boyfriend of the narrator, Kat, leaves really early in the morning to go to work. So Kat wakes up, she continues unpacking, and in the process finds a note that was left behind by the previous tenant with all these weird rules about things and ways to like actually survive in the apartment because it is a matter of life and death. So um, things that she talked about that were on the list were like the creepy window washing guy that you can't let
Mhm.
into your apartment, weird cats that roam around, demonic little kids, monsters, things like that. So, and yeah, the most important monster or creature so far is the ones that are at the elevator that will attack and or kill you if you take the elevator within a certain window of time. So, unfortunately, Kat's boyfriend, who on the first day left really early, he used the elevator during that forbidden window of time.
Jamie!
Exactly. Poor Jamie. He took the elevator
No.
before they had found that note, so they didn't know that they couldn't do that, and he's been missing ever since. So, as Kat has been trying to piece together what happened to Jamie and what's going on in the apartment in general, she's had a lot of harrowing experiences, but the main one that's important to the story is that her friend Georgia came over to like console her about Jamie being missing. And
Mhm.
Georgia invited somebody in who had claimed that they were a neighbor. She let them into the apartment. Turned out to be like a demon, maybe entity
Mhm.
named Natalia, who ended up almost burning Georgia to death.
Oh my
So,
god. Forgot about that. Jesus.
yeah. So, in the last part we read, Kat had tracked down the former tenant of the apartment, Prudence Hemmings, so that she could confront her about everything and also be like, why was you were so cowardly to leave that note in a
Mhm.
place where we may not have found it, and now Jamie's gone. And Prudence was mostly apologetic. She told Kat a lot about what happened to her while she was living in that apartment, including that her husband had developed dementia. And because of that, he accidentally broke one of the survival rules. And that resulted in him being killed by one of the weird creatures that lives in the building. But Prudence, knowing that she had to hide the truth of his real cause of death, pushed him off the balcony. So she's pretty intense. And then,
Yeah.
not long after that, or maybe around the same time, her granddaughter, Lila, came over for a sleepover. And while Prudence wasn't paying attention, Lila went out into the hallway, and it was during that forbidden time window and pushed the elevator call button. And she was killed, or so we thought, by those creatures in the elevator. But then we found out that actually she didn't die, and Prudence had been able to save her with the help of the gardener, Derek. But now Lila has turned into one of those monsters, and she's being kept in a cage in Prudence's backyard.
It just gets darker and darker, eh?
It really does. And we're still
She's like, yeah, I got
somewhere.
my granddaughter in a
Yeah.
cage.
Yep,
Jesus.
exactly. And it was in that part I remember her saying something like, I just couldn't bring myself to kill her. I don't
Yeah.
know how she feels, but she's still my granddaughter. I can't kill her, so she's here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Kat was devastated by everything she heard, and especially because I think we can assume that maybe Jamie has been turned into one of these monsters if that's what happened to Lila when she was gotten by them. So when Kat goes back home, she decides that she doesn't want to be alone, so she goes to see a neighbor that she had met in the hallway named Terry. And Terry has two kids, Eddie and Ellie. Um, when they first met, they looked totally normal, maybe a little weird, but totally normal otherwise. And so she goes to Terry's apartment. She's having a cup of coffee, and there's a bunch of loud banging. And then Eddie and Ellie run in, and they do not look normal anymore because they have like black eyeballs and
Black eyed kids.
talons, yeah, and teeth and all of that. So, but the weird part is they look so scary, but they run into the room and they run to their mom and they're like, oh my God, I'm sorry. We didn't mean to let them in. So then the group goes out into the living room and there's 10 strangers standing in there. The only recognizable one is Natalia, who is the one who almost killed Georgia. So that's where we left off last time. And now, in 5 minutes or less, I'm going to summarize the next three parts.
I love that. Okay, wait, before you do that, did she talk to Derek at the gardener at one point too about Jamie and he was basically like, I can't help you?
That was the mailman,
The
Postman Ian.
mailman.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, because the gardener's gone, right? He doesn't live there anymore.
yeah, he's
Okay, got
gone.
it, got it, got it. Okay.
Yeah, let me see. I think that was all the important details, but yeah,
I
the
think so too.
postman.
I was just thinking about that one piece about Derek.
Yeah, yeah.
He
So
gone.
he's gone for now.
Okay. Okay.
So, um, okay, so in the next part, Natalia explains that she and the people that are in Terry's living room are members of a cult led by someone named Michael. And
Oh, no. Wait, that's like worse somehow.
yeah, I mean, well, they're not alive technically. We'll get to that part. But yeah, so Michael and his brother Joseph lived in an apartment in the building, and Michael did all his culty business from there. And he and his brother never saw eye to eye, so they had these big, like, blowout fights pretty often, and there were a bunch of people in and out of the apartment. So you can imagine they weren't the most popular neighbors. Um, so eventually, one night, somebody called the police on them, um, and they were forcibly evicted from the apartment. And Michael, the cult leader, he was furious. And even though what he preached was like peace and harmony and all that, he was out for blood. So
Oh, good. Good, good, good.
he, yeah, he ordered his followers to go back to the apartment and burn the entire floor that they lived on and ensure that there were no survivors. Um, and he made that judgment just because he assumed that it the person who called had to have been someone that lived on the same floor as them. I don't think he had much logic really
Yeah,
for that. Um,
just
so
pissed off.
yeah, exactly. So his loyal followers went back and they did that. And um, one detail that we learned is that in the apartment building, sometimes the stairs like move or grow or
Mhm.
change. So the followers went, they started the fire. They were like, okay, this is engulfing the whole thing now. Let's get out of here. So they went into the stairwell and they kept running and they kept running and they kept ending up in the same place. So it was like the building was
Oh,
trapping them,
yeah.
and they all ended up dying, burning in the fire in the stairwell.
Perished in the fire.
Exactly. So they perished, but they came back as whatever they are today, um,
Ew.
with
Oh,
their
and
like,
that's why they can burn
yeah,
people.
exactly. They can like wield fire, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but the only thing is that they are completely confined to the building. They
Mm,
can't ever leave, and also they can only go in places where they're invited, kind of like vampires.
interesting. They
Yes.
really are forthcoming about their secrets.
Well, I think that they didn't tell anyone that. They
Oh,
just
okay.
realized that, but eventually people figured it out.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it came out eventually that Bernie Hemmings, so Prudence's late husband, was the one who
Mm.
had called the police on them. And so
Oh.
they blamed him for their fate of being trapped in this building. And they blamed him for the loss of Michael, who was actually imprisoned on Bernie's testimony. Um,
Mm.
so they ended up like targeting Prudence, basically.
Got it.
But that's how Prudence ended up discovering a way to like keep them out of the apartment. She also had a way to get rid of them so that they were forced to leave her alone. And at that point, Kat, the narrator, she's like, why didn't she tell me how to like
Right.
get rid of them? So she starts getting a little suspicious of Prudence.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah. So then things are escalating, and Eddie and Ellie, the kids, because they're still in the apartment, they finally like attack all of these people with their scary eyes and their big teeth and whatever, and they all flee. So it actually
Okay.
works. But Natalia
Great.
says, "This isn't over," and then
This
that
isn't over,
part,
demon kids.
exactly, and that part ends with, "This is war." So Kat
Oh.
wants to get rid of them, and they want to get rid of
Okay.
Kat. So,
Right.
um,
Mortal
in
slash not mortal enemies.
exactly, yes,
Not
exactly,
immortal, probably, but not human.
yeah, something. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, the next part, I have like barely anything to summarize it because it was just that she
Bit
attends.
of a filler.
Yeah, because it was she went to a meeting with the other tenants of the building,
Right. Okay.
and they, I guess, have these meetings with some frequency just to discuss things that are going on and like why is that weird man always sitting on the fifth floor, that kind of thing. um, so she went there. A lot of people were telling her as the newbie stories about what's happened to them living in the apartment, and she figured out that the commonality among all of their stories is that Derek, the gardener, he was always key to like helping them resolve or survive their situations.
Interesting.
So Kat, knowing that Derek's like spirit or whatever he is, we don't really know, is attached to the garden. So she decides that she's going to plant some shrubs out there in hopes that he'll appear, and lo and behold, he does.
Oh, good instincts, Kat.
Yes. So he comes. This is the next part already. Kat convinces Derek to show her what he had showed Prudence, as in how to kill or get rid of whatever those cult members are. And she chats with him a while. He says, "Don't worry, like I'm gonna take care of it. You go to sleep, and I'll come back." But of course, instead of letting him handle it, she is waiting up for him in the morning on the stairs, and he's like, "Okay, fine." So he begrudgingly
Okay,
shows,
fine.
yeah, begrudgingly shows her that the building itself has decided to seal off the floor that was burned. So, like, no one can get in there except for Derek and whoever he brings, and the cult members who can move in and out of there.
Yeah.
Um, but he takes her there, and there was a lot of detail about this that I don't think was that important, but basically, to get rid of them, you're not killing them. It's like you have the ability to trap them in a room if you invite them into there. So it was like they were on this burned floor. There's some rooms, most don't have doors, but even without the doors, she could go in and invite one of them to come, and then they're trapped. So
I see.
they do that to Natalia, and she's stuck. So that's one problem down.
Like indefinitely, or is
Yeah,
she gonna get out? Oh,
indefinitely.
indefinitely. All
Yeah,
right. We
because
love
when
that.
yes, when they went up there, she saw others that like Prudence had trapped in there,
Oh,
and they're still
I
just
see.
there existing. So
Got it.
yeah,
War ended.
exactly.
Fast, quick.
Yeah, that was a fast battle. Um,
Yeah.
so let's see. Okay, then they do that. They're walking back down the stairs. Kat looks out at the garden, and she sees Prudence hacking away at the shrubs that she had planted in order to get Derek to come back. So now let's read.
Oh my God. Okay, yes. Hit me. Hit me.
Oh, dang it. Why did it go away? Now I have to click through like 13 parts to get to the one that we need. Oh no.
No.
Okay, hang on. Bear with me.
All good.
Um, I had it open and these are long. Okay, how our confrontation went. Um,
I like the way that they label like it's like actually like here's how it happened and you're
yeah.
like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, they do a good job of like linking all of these on
Yeah,
Reddit, but still, it's like, geez, I can't
I
keep
know it's a
track.
lot.
Okay, Derek arrived. I think I'm one part away now. Um,
I'm dying.
Prudence, yeah, hacking away. Okay, there we go. All right.
That bitch
We made it.
made
So,
it.
here we go. When I saw her out the window, garden shears gripped by both hands and a maniacal expression on her face, I just stood still. I was frozen to the spot in shock. I felt no pain at all from the burn on my face. Oh, yeah, that was from being on the ninth floor where
Oh,
the burn had happened, the
classic.
fire. Everything was numb. The relief of eradicating the imposter neighbors and the joy at finding a friend in Derek was hacked away in an instant. Just like every leaf from my shrubs. Why would she do this? What had I ever done to her? Every question possible crossed my mind. I could feel the frustration bubbling inside me. Everything about this place just threw up question after question, and for every answer I got, there were 10 new questions waiting to be asked. At that moment in time, though, only one was truly important. How did Prudence know? I thought about Terry and her telephone conversations. I didn't want to think that the sweet lady I thought Terry had turned out to be would do that, but it did cross my mind. I thought of Ian, the postman. I'd had bad vibes from him for a while. Maybe he'd seen Derek coming up the stairs on his rounds that morning. I stood there frozen, pondering all these things until I saw Prudence collapse onto the memorial bench, sobbing, head in hands. She was surrounded by the remains of my attempt at a garden, with the shears laid out on the floor. The stairs were kind to me on the way down. It took 4 flights to make it to the bottom. I ran down the corridor and out the back entrance of the block, no idea what I was going to say. Prudence was all I could manage. Nice one, Cat. She sat bolt upright before turning and standing quicker than I thought it possible for an old lady. You evil, stupid little girl. Do you have
Oh my
any
God.
idea what you've done? She screamed, so much animation in her face that the spaces between her wrinkles pulsated like veins on an angry weightlifter. Me? You think I'm evil? You left that shitty note hidden, missing everything I need to know, and got my boyfriend killed. And what you're doing to your own, I screamed, tears beginning to roll before she interrupted me. Don't you dare talk about her. Her voice cracked, and she broke down again, this time falling to her knees, twigs and leaves sticking to the bottom of her dress. I didn't know what else to do, so I sat down on the floor. I knew that it was probably a bad idea. This woman couldn't be trusted, and I hadn't forgotten that. But seeing an old lady crying on the cement floor still made me feel awful. How did you know about the garden? I asked her calmly, trying to change my approach. She shoved a crumpled up piece of paper into my hand. She didn't look at me. Her eyes remained on the floor. Dear Prudence, I couldn't exist knowing what I'd done. I should never have told you about it. The last 2 won't grow stronger. She was never theirs to begin with, but I have to end her suffering. I'm sorry. Derek. I knew what he had done as soon as I finished the note. Lila, or what was left of her, was gone for good. Of all the creatures, only Jamie's killers from the lift remained. That's how Derek had spent the few hours I'd slept between our encounters. This is all your fault, she sniffed. My whole family are gone because of you. That hurt a lot. I trembled as I tried to speak, but I always really hated confrontation, and I could feel myself starting to glitch. How can you say that? I saw her, and she was trapped in a tiny cage eating dog food and small animals. Your family died in that lift, just like my Jamie. I may have struggled to get my words out, but I wasn't about to let Prudence Hemmings blame me for her decisions. Lila was better off dead than what she was, however awful that may sound. What happened to your face? Prudence growled at me. Take you to visit floor number 9? He did this to her in the first place, not me, and now he's disfigured you. She was spinning things. I could feel throbbing as she mentioned my face. I really should have had medical attention. This isn't his fault. You messed him up, and he did that to her because of you. You told me that yourself. I tried ferociously to defend Derek, but something inside me still felt uncomfortable about what he had done. I think she's referring to him helping her get Lila back,
Yeah,
and then
I
I
think
think
so
he
too.
killed her now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I couldn't help it. Lila was an innocent little girl who shouldn't have been punished for Prue's mistakes. The whole thing was such a mess. I was grieving, and then I had her back for all those years, and then I lost Bernie, and then my home, and now I have to grieve for her all over again. Prudence continued to cry, but softer. I looked around at the chaos she created and up at the block my boyfriend had died in and rolled my eyes in disbelief that she could be so selfish. She continued, "Let me tell you about Lila. She was a beautiful little girl. As I mentioned before, I have two other older children. They've had many other grandchildren. However, I hadn't spoken to my eldest two in years, even before what happened with Lila. Lila was my first opportunity to get to know one of my grandchildren. Bernie adored her too, always reading her stories and sneaking her sweets. I begged my son to allow her to stay. My children were all incredibly ungrateful. They had it easy growing up and still resented me. I gave them a good, strict upbringing, but they didn't appreciate it. Who appreciates a strict
No,
upbringing?"
no one wants that.
Yeah. They said I was a cruel mother. Lila's dad was the only one I spoke to, but our relationship still wasn't that of a typical loving mother and son. But she was a second chance. It was a miracle when he agreed. I was more shocked he had convinced his wife to allow it. That awful harlot of a woman never liked me, although I didn't like her either. They refused to speak to me after everything. I haven't heard from them since. They had more grandchildren I'll never meet. I knew at the time my relationships with any of my children were over for good. So when Derek gave me a solution, I took it. I wasn't entirely truthful when we first spoke. I said I hadn't wanted this, but I was desperate. There was never a way to bring her back safely. Derek explained what she would become to me. He was initially trying to put me off even trying to get her back. I knew exactly what I was getting into. But I couldn't pass up the idea of my beautiful little Lila needing her grandma forever. I suppose I was too ashamed to admit it before, but why should I be ashamed? My altercation with Derek happened after she was back, when he tried to kill her the first time. Spouting the same things on that note, what kind of monster wants to kill a little girl? That's why I trashed the garden. He said he wasn't coping with the news of the new block when he suggested it, that he shouldn't have told me it was even possible and she had to die. I hid her until the bulldozers came. That's right. I think they were building something over the garden, and that's why Derek disappeared for a while.
Got it.
So, when he disappeared, I thought I was safe to spend the rest of my life with her. Bernie hated me. Spending time with Lila was all I lived for. I grew to love her how she was. I felt sick. Listening to Prudence talk brought up so many repressed feelings about Jamie. I hadn't had time to grieve or process anything. I missed him terribly. My old life and my old future felt a million miles away. I was relieved to know that Derek hadn't tricked Prudence or even intended to create Rat Lila. He was truly good. But she didn't get to have a life. You lived for her, but she wasn't really living. How could a sane person do that to their own flesh and blood? I retorted. You have no idea. This place can make you do irrational things. But she had a life. She had me. It's all she needed. She was certainly right
Ew.
about, yeah, creepy.
It's like some weird, like Munchauser by proxy
Yeah,
bullshit right
uh-huh.
there.
Yeah, it is. She was certainly right about the building and irrational actions. The pain intensifying on my face throbbed in agreement, but I was still convinced she had lost it Dr. Frankenstein style, where Rat Lila was concerned. Speaking of Munchausen, yeah. Speaking of
Oh God.
Munchausen's, really briefly,
Yeah,
I all of this stuff with Gypsy Rose
I
Blanchard,
know.
is it really weird to you?
It's really, really weird that she's
Yeah.
becoming like a reality star or
Yeah.
something.
I don't like it. It's creepy.
It makes me really uncomfortable. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for her.
Yeah,
Like she
absolutely. Suffered.
acted basically in self-defense, but it's like weird to call it that because it was so like there wasn't an immediate threat. It was like she was constantly being
Right.
threatened. It's like killing an abuser.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's horrible, but it's also like so eerie and dark. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like this is the kind of attention her mother sort of like trained her to seek.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
now killing the mother is kind of how she got it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It makes me it's very uneasy to
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah. It's bizarre because
Yeah. It's
it's,
very
yeah, like we're
bizarre.
celebrating her when she
I
committed
know.
premeditated murder.
I
Like,
know.
even if it was justified, it's
Yeah, I know.
really
It shouldn't be
bizarre.
celebrated. Yeah,
No.
I know.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Anyway.
Retweet. Anyway,
Here we
back
go.
to Prudence.
Yeah. So she had stopped crying. Her rage levels were rising again. I tried to tell her that it wasn't really the child she'd known, but she seemed to have grown an entirely new attachment to the creature that replaced what she had lost. Every rational argument I gave was met with increasing levels of screaming. She got less coherent as she went on. The argument was going nowhere. We went back and forth for what felt like forever. After a while, she started to get closer to me. We had both stood up by this point, and despite her haggard and frail appearance, Prudence was truly frightening. She looked unhinged. Her words were no longer going in. I was overwhelmed and had too many thoughts rushing through my mind to process her ranting. I took a few steps back, clearing a small distance between us. By this point, out of the corner of my eye, I could see neighbors in windows of the block watching the altercation outside. Prue's screaming had brought a lot of attention. It was bright and I couldn't see well, but I turned to scan the windows and did recognize Eddie and Ellie watching from their bedroom, trying to wave at me. They frantically waved and pointed. I tried waving back and gesturing to them, but they kept pointing at me. Why were they pointing? Then I heard it, the garden shears scraping against the ground as
Oh
Prudence
God.
picked them up and charged toward me. You ignorant little bitch. You aren't even listening. You don't deserve my home. You killed her. The twins had been telling me to turn around. I shouldn't have taken my eyes off her. Luckily, unlike my earlier shock when I had first seen her, I didn't freeze. My fight or flight instincts kicked in and I ran faster than I ever have before. I burst back into the building and heard neighbors on the bottom floor lock their doors in a symphony of bolts clicking. I couldn't blame them. Prudence was not far behind me, and I wouldn't want to take her on in her current state if given a choice. But it didn't stop me pounding on their doors begging someone to call the police, although something told me that in this building that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, we're way past the
Yeah,
police.
they can't do anything here, that's
No.
for sure. I ran up the stairs, still being followed by her. By the second floor, most were still locked, but a few had come out of their homes, armed with a variety of heavy objects. Even in a crisis, I couldn't fault the community spirit here. I ran another flight of stairs that became two, but still led me to floor 3, and then to the back of the corridor. I pounded on Terry's door. My heart was racing, but when I turned, Prue was nowhere to be seen. I was hoping the people who had come out on floor 2 had stopped her, but something was odd. I hadn't heard any commotion. This wasn't the end of it. Eddie and Ellie hugged me tight as Terry let me in and bolted the door shut quickly behind me. I told her about what had happened. She couldn't believe what Prue had done. It turned out no one knew about Lila. I was edgy for the first hour, but Prue had disappeared. Terry helped to clean up my burn and put some cold compress on it. She offered to take me to the hospital, but I just couldn't. I was too shaken up from what had just happened. I couldn't face trying to explain how I'd sustained my injuries, and I still hadn't reported Jamie missing. He still hadn't had any messages
Oh
from his
God, yeah.
yeah. He still hadn't had any messages from his family, and work had given up calling, but his friends had started. They were harassing me nonstop, but I had been too distracted to come up with a decent lie. It had been about a week since I moved in. God, only a week and
I
all of
know. I was
this.
gonna say, how much time has elapsed? But a week.
Yeah,
Holy shit.
not that long.
Jam-packed days.
Yeah. and it wouldn't be long until people realized something was seriously wrong. My conversations with my family had been short, with me insisting they didn't visit until we were unpacked and set up. On top of a murderous old lady and an untold amount of abnormal issues, the real world problems were starting to creep up on me. I sat with Terry for hours, drinking tea and chatting to her. It started to get dark, and Eddie and Ellie came into the living room after playing in their room for a while. The voids replaced the big brown puppy dog eyes again, and their claws looked especially sharp, but to me they were still adorable. Their transformation prompted me to head back to my flat. It was late. I needed to work out what to do next and how to dig myself out of this giant hole. I couldn't just keep planting gardens. I needed to do this myself. I wandered up the stairs. They went on for a while, but nothing too horrific. I passed a man on floor 5, nodding politely and continuing my ascent. I wondered if he'd received the letter of concern yet. He was a little unsettling. um, when I got to my floor, Mr. Prentice was making his animal noises again. I smiled, which hurt my face. After all the madness, I was starting to find the seemingly benign horrors of this building oddly comforting. I reached my flat and turned the key in the door before bolting myself in like Terry had. I could feel something wasn't right the moment I entered. The flat was in chaos, which was nothing new because we had only moved in a week ago and I had been too preoccupied to unpack. But things were out of place. The organized chaos was not how I had left it. Then she strolled out of my kitchen, Prudence Hemmings. She was carrying a large carving knife in her left hand this
Oh
time.
my god.
And this time she had prepared for her attack. She smiled at me and lifted her right hand, jingling a set of keys that she had entered with. I turned to unbolt the door, but she grabbed me from behind before I could turn the handle to open it and held the knife to my throat. I will kill you for what you've done, she whispered into my ear. Yeah. Without a second thought, I leaned forward just a tad and swung my head back as hard as I could. I couldn't believe that it worked, but I must have broken her nose. Prudence dropped the
Let's
knife
go, cat.
and clutched her face, blood streaming between her fingers. I went to grab the knife, but she was closer and doing the same thing. I had no other option but to run again. I grabbed the door handle um, and turned it to exit the flat as she tried to stab me. I was mostly out the door, but her arm was close enough to reach my side, and I felt the knife pierce the side of my torso.
Oh shit.
I was in
You got
serious
stabbed?
pain. Yes, I did.
Jesus.
And this keeps going on. I didn't realize. Okay, let's see if
Oh
I
my
can
god.
skip some. I did not summarize this part. Let's see.
Oh, it's okay. Now I'm really in it.
Okay, well, let's just continue then. She got stabbed. Let's see. Oh, she ran toward Mr. Prentice's door. Um, Prudence stabbing at me frantically with blood gushing from her
Oh my
nose.
god.
A few got me as I stepped outside the flat. The pain was awful, and I could feel myself starting to drift out of consciousness. I was losing a lot of blood. I would give my last breath to end Prue. So, running on nothing but adrenaline, I knocked hard on flat 48 and shouted, "Mr. Prentice, can you help me?" It was a shot in the dark. I didn't know what would happen, but I had to try something. She had stopped stabbing me. I was incredibly weak, la la la. I heard heavy clunking from the inside of flat 48, chain locks being released, and bolts
I
being
was incredibly weak, blah blah blah. I'm dying, I'm bleeding out, blah blah blah.
la la. I've been stabbed, whatever. Um, and let's see. I watched with blurry vision as a large creature that I can only describe as a cross between a bull and a wolf charged out of the flat and trampled the old witch to death. I heard her bones crunch just as I slipped away. I woke up in the hospital a day later. My parents were there, as were the police. Apparently, I had been found just outside the tower block with my handbag missing by a neighbor who had been watching from a window as it happened. The police told me that the person had seen the mugging out of their window. Obviously, they're all in this together. Um,
Yeah, jeez.
they had seen two men approach me and Jamie, they said, splash something in my face, attack us, and when he tried to fight back, they bundled my boyfriend into a car, which the police had been searching for to no avail. He was officially missing.
That's so
Yeah,
clever.
a little cover up. Um,
Oh my God. Collusion.
yes, I was baffled. I'd been stabbed 4 times, but thankfully in all the right places, if there is such a
Jesus.
thing. Um, let's see, the police promised to keep us updated, but they still couldn't find the car that they said Jamie was taken off in. My parents weren't keen on me returning to the flat after what happened. They said the area was just too rough and that I was living proof it wasn't safe. They offered to go in and collect my stuff for me. No. Um, I was released from the hospital 2 days after I woke up there. So she goes back. She goes and she sees Mr. Prentice walking along with his newspaper and milk in a bag. He turned to me and smiled. I wasn't sure you'd come back. It's nice to see you're up and walking.
Yeah, why did you?
Yeah, crazy. He made small talk as if I hadn't seen him literally trample a woman to death a couple days prior. The whole experience had been so disorienting that I started to wonder if I really had been mugged. Um, he says, I never liked that woman, but you've got a real friend in that lady downstairs. He winked at me and turned the key in his door. That must have been Terry. Um, Terry knocked on the door, my handbag that I had left at hers before Prue attacked in my flat on her arm. Mr. Prentice was right. She was a good friend, so she must have weaved this whole story. Um, okay. It's been a few days now, and I've decided to stay. I can't imagine going back to complete normality after everything I've been through, and I've grown quite attached to some of the building's quirks. I tried replanting the garden with the help of the twins. I ripped a few stitches doing it, and Derek never came. I think he's gone for good. I'm ready to fully embrace life here. The last few days have been hard, but there's some time to breathe. Along with the time to breathe came the time to grieve, and I've been grieving badly for Jamie. This leads me to the last thing I have to tell you. Last night, I laid in bed, plagued with thoughts of Prue and everything that happened, but what I couldn't get to leave my mind was how much happiness it brought her to have Lila back. It infected every part of my thoughts. I know you all warned me not to, but I did it. I repeated the ritual. I haven't I
No.
haven't caught him yet, but I've heard the scratching. Jamie's back.
No. Why?
That's
Why did
the
you do
end.
that, you stupid
No,
girl?
she. That's idiotic. Yeah. So
Oh, you
more
dumb
to
hoe.
come.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm trying to
I don't
count
even
the
know.
parts.
Yeah, I started going down the rabbit hole and I was like,
Oh,
there's a lot.
wait, hang on. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4,
What?
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
No.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
Total or left?
Total, but I don't
We're
even know
on
what
what, 8?
yeah, 8, something like that. So,
Buckle up, babies.
yeah. At first,
Maybe we
I was
read them
looking,
all.
there's like,
Oh,
but it's
Jesus.
just other series
Oh,
that
other
the author.
stories. Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus. Oh, that's nice that you found them somewhere in one place,
Yeah, finally
I guess.
needed that.
I guess.
Yeah. Well,
Oh my God.
that's the apartment. I'm weak or
Wow.
whatever.
I'm weak. I got stabbed. Whatever. Wow. Okay. Well, St. Patrick's Day is right around the corner. We're gonna figure out how to wrap this up for you guys. I
Yes.
promise. It's such a good one, but you're right. It's like so intensive.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, when you're falling asleep, make sure to check the foot of your bed, guys,
Yeah.
for someone to wish you a good
God,
night.
no.
Good
What a
night.
nightmare. No.
No!
Good night,
Um,
Olivia.
Good night. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for listening. This was kind of a long one, but happy Valentine's Day. I think it's
Yeah.
actually 2 days after Valentine's Day. Yeah. But happy Valentine's Day belated. Hope you had a smoochy smooch fest on Wednesday.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see y'all next week.
Stay
Stay spooky.
spooky.
Bye.
Bye.